sized right, there weren't loops at the right places. There wasn't enough volume and pressure in key places throughout the city as it should be. And one of the side effects, besides the fact when you turn on your faucet it might dribble out, is that the fire hydrants wouldn't have the adequate amount of pressure that the firemen can use. Or better yet, there wasn't ever a fire hydrant there in the first place. About 136 new fire hydrants are needed. It affects 2,700 properties. Fire hydrants are important. They have to be 300 feet apart so that the firemen can run their hose within a reasonable distance to fight a structure fire. That's why we do it. It also affects insurance rates. It's important to get those done. So now we've got these other studies. This one goes back to 2005 that says you need to do this. We've got this new information on the road system. Mayor and Commission goes, why don't we push them together so that if we're going to be tearing up roads to fix the pipes, fix the drainage, fix the sewers, why don't we take the information from the road study and push it down together and coordinate the two programs together so that we fix it once and fix it right. Lake Worth 2020, that's one of the key components on this. While it focuses on the road side of it and the drainage, it coordinates with the other programs so that we're doing these projects with the underground utilities once and doing it right and fixing it. Okay. Now, all well and good. How do you pay for it? This is a detailed sheet that goes over how a general obligation bond program would work. Now, general obligation bonds are the way cities and counties fund and borrow money for major assets and construction. It's what they do. There are thousands of examples of this continuously across the state of Florida. It is not unique to us. We've actually had general bond obligations in the past. Right now, in the general fund, there is no debt. Okay, I want to make that clear. There is no debt. The city does not have any in the general fund. We do have debt that we have borrowed in the utilities. And the water and the electric utilities are almost like businesses because they sell and they create and sell a product that you buy and there's a revenue generated. And you can borrow against that revenue stream independently. It doesn't even require a vote of the public to do that. And we do have debt that has been committed to in those two businesses for what their needs are. But on this side of the house, in the general fund, there is no debt. The other key thing about a general obligation bond, and the Mayor and Commission were very interested in this, it's one of the most democratic forms of indebtedness because it requires your vote. They can't just arbitrarily go out and borrow $63.5 million. And that's why it was important they wanted to do it this way. It would appear on your tax bill, right below the category of Lake Worth, there would be a debt, and the millage rate would appear there. So let's go through, and let me walk you through the three borrowings as we see them happening. Issuance one is for $28 million. It's for the first 2 years of projects that are currently are scheduled for those first 2 years. It would be issued June of 2015. In order to make the payments on that, we would have to generate $1,945,000 a year to pay that debt. And that, based on our taxable valuation of the city, would require a 1.64 millage rate. Okay? Issuance 2 would occur in the third year. It would be for $14,300,000. It would be again in June, but in 2017. In order to make the payments on that tranche, as they call it, or borrowing, it would require an additional $1 million. So basically, we would be paying $3 million a year, and we would raise the millage then for the second borrowing would go to 2.3 mils. In the last year, the third borrowing or third issuance would occur, and that would finish out the programs, and that would be $20 million. It would occur in June of 2019, And to make the payments on that loan is $1,400,000 a year. So when you combine those three payments to pay on those three loans, the total millage rate as projected in this sheet is 3.14 mils. Now, just a couple of important things. There are some assumptions in this projection. The first one is we're borrowing for 30 years at 5.5%. Okay, we had to come up with a number that seemed reasonable. We probably will get something better than that. I think a lot of y'all would like to get 5.5% on some of your returns. But, yeah, exactly. But we didn't want to oversell this. We wanted to be very conservative in some of these numbers. So we factored in a 5.5% in 30 years. We also factored in a 4% annual increase on the property taxable valuation. As the city as a whole, what the taxable valuation number would be would only grow at 4% a year over the life of these bonds. That was the other big assumption that we made. You know, this year we saw a 9.7% increase in taxable value as things are coming on. But for these numbers, 4%. Okay, so you with me? All right. Now let's back up a little bit. I want to make sure that everyone completely understands the different terms we're using so that you can really figure this out. Because you need to understand how this tax works. And some people, you know, they write a check for their profit, for their principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, and they send it off. They don't even look at the tax bill. What is the millage rate? What is a mill? Mill basically is how local governments tax property. It's your ad valorem tax rate. It's what we levy to fund local government, in this case to fund a bond. Be very clear, 1 mil equals $1 for every $1,000 of taxable value. All right? So in the first borrowing, it's 1.64 mils is what's being projected. For every $1,000 of valuation, you would pay $1.64. All right? So, taxable value. Ding. Taxable value.
Is not.
Okay, let's get a little more interesting here. Taxable value is your assessed value minus any exemptions you might qualify for. Okay, so follow with me, but let's be sure about this. Taxable value is not your appraised value that some realtor gave you, or market value, your assessed value, real estate listing, or as the mayor said, you're not going to find that on Zillow, okay? So it's not any of those things. What is assessed value? Assessed value is what the property appraiser creates. You have to literally go and look and find, because every property is going to be different. Because depending upon how long you've owned it, when you bought it, there are certain caps and restrictions that separate your assessed value from market value. They're very different. For example, the Save Our Homes cap, which if you live in your home, you have a homestead exemption. While the property around you may be going up 10, 20, 30% a year, your assessed value only goes up a maximum of 3% a year because you're a homeowner. And the property appraiser tracks that assessed value for you. So theoretically, you could be in a home and your assessed value could be like half of what the market value would be. All right? And also, there's a 10% cap on non-homestead properties and a 10% cap a year on commercial. So it's not just homestead properties. Now, once you got that assessed value, which is very unique to your property, you may qualify for exemptions. And there's a whole array of exemptions. Probably the most easy to understand and the one that you're dealing with is the homestead exemption in Florida. We grant $25,000 off the assessed value if you're a qualified resident. And you might also get an additional other amount, another 25. There's senior exemptions, widowers, veterans. There's a bunch of them. But again, that's also individual to your property. That comes off that assessed value, and that gives you your taxable value. Okay? So we'll help you if you have any questions about going on the property appraiser site. to help you find out exactly what your taxable value is. So if your taxable value, and let's use an example here. I don't know whose house this is. Is this your, Commissioner Maxwell? No, it's not. I'm just teasing. I can't read that. It's very small. What we did is we took an example. Now this property here, and this is directly off of the property appraiser site, you can see that the market value on this property, it's a single family home, is $108,138 is what this one is at market. However, the assessed value, which is based on a cap, is actually $102,247. So this property probably sold not too many years back. This homeowner qualifies for a $50,000 exemption. So that $50,000 comes off of that assessed value, so that the difference, in a circle right there, is $52,247 is the taxable value. So we took that number and we went to the handy-dandy property calculator, which helps estimate what the payments would be based on the millage rates we're projecting for this bond. So we entered in $52,247 there in the yellow, and you can do this too on the city's website. That particular property, on the first borrowing at 1.64 mils, will pay $85.69 annually, or $7.14 monthly. In the second borrowing in 2017, the millage rate is 2.3 mils. Their tax would go to $120.17, or $10.01 each month. And the last borrowing in 2019, at 3.14 mils, they would be paying $164.06, or $13.67 a month. And those are examples, like I said, we can help you with and walk you through. So I hope everybody's clear on understanding between taxable value, assessed value, and what villages are. So, what are some of the... Mayor mentioned about renewed relationships that we have with other governmental entities. And there's a lot of interest in Lake Worth these days. People really want to help us out. The mayor serves on the Metropolitan Planning Organization, which is actually the county entity that sets the infrastructure improvements on the state level and the county level, 5 to 10 years in the future. And there's a lot of interest in helping us do things on Dixie Highway and in all kinds of studies and needs and hopefully, infrastructure improvements that'll come out of that. And that kind of partnership hasn't always existed with us. On the state of Florida, we have had a problem working with them because, contrary to popular belief, Tallahassee and Washington, just because you're a nice person, you go up there and ask for the money, doesn't mean you're going to get it. You have to have designs, plans, estimates, some skin in the game. They want to see that level of competency, because the worst thing that can happen is they go and give you money, you can't spend it, or you don't spend it properly. That level of competency requires that you've done your homework, that you've figured out the numbers, that you've done the designs and shovel ready. And that's where we're heading with our projects in Lake Worth, whether it's the utility projects or if this is approved, the roadway and drainage projects. All this is nice. The net effect that you need to really understand is there's a commitment to proceed to try to go and get help to defray the cost. Because what will happen is, if the money is used to supplant what we need to borrow, you can borrow less. And the commission and the mayor have already said that they would not borrow money on the end of this, which would lower the millage rate. Okay? We're sticking to the millage rate that we projected. We want you to understand that. But this is an important part of our process that we're committed to doing. Safeguards. There's been a lot of talk about the ballot language. The ballot language is 75 words by state law. You are very limited to what you can put in there. If you read the language, it talks about things within the right-of-way. There's not some language in there that gives us the ability to go out and buy a bunch of property, or to go and build a Taj Mahal City Hall for us to have new offices, or some kind of other purpose. This is about things within the rights-of-way. The bond documents, I had some interesting comments. Somebody told me they heard that they were reading the bond documents. Bond documents do not exist yet. We have to get approval first from the voting public. The next step then would be to move towards the bond process. So there are no bond documents, but when they are created, they are very specific about the purpose and intent of what you're doing with that money. And there is some serious legal implications if you don't follow bond documents and you misuse borrowed money. Believe me, you borrow money from people, you can get in a lot of trouble if you don't spend it correctly. And they'll be made public, as the mayor said. This is all a public process. We now have an internal auditor. I don't know if you know that. It's in our charter. For 6 or 7 years, that position was vacant. We now have an internal auditor who's doing a wonderful job for the last year, Ken Oakes. And he examines continuously the process and things that we do at City Hall and makes reports to the commission. And we also have outside legal staff. I don't want to minimize our attorney, Glentor City, has been incredible in helping us with our legal advice and overseeing our operations. Again, the professional project managers, the city hasn't always had the best reputation with certain things and building things. That's why it was important to contract out with a firm, and that's part of this process. And they'll be required to report and update both on the time as well as how the money and the contracts are proceeding. And then, in a larger perspective, there's the internal Inspector General at the county level and the Ethics Commission. We now, in Palm Beach County, operate a lot differently than maybe occurred 10 or 20 years ago. And those things are in place as well. It would be a big mistake to go through this process and not have committed to budgeting properly and planning for the roads deteriorating again. This is an asset that warrants constant maintaining and replacement and figuring out what we need to do. It would have been great if the people before us had done that for the last 50 or 60 years. But going forward, that sophisticated process I showed you at the beginning of grading and monitoring the road system, the drainage systems, and everything else drives your budgeting process. And it's not rocket science. Most cities do this. We're moving in that direction so that we will have 5 and 10-year capital budgets where we will know, 7 years out, these stretches of road will probably need this kind of work on it. And we put those numbers out there so that future commissions and future administrations can't run away from those numbers. They're there. We know that it needs to be taken care of. You either have to say, you know what, we've examined the road now 7 years later, it's got 2 more years wide, or you know what, it's got some more serious issues. We need to budget these things before we do other things. And that's why it's important in the process that we're creating to commit to those things now so that they're put out there, we understand their needs so that we don't go off in different directions. And it'll help guide the city. August 26th is the date. I hope everybody comes out. And is there one more slide? Is that it? There we go. That is one more slide. This is our website, lakeworth.org, www.lakeworth.org. You go on the first page, you'll see that logo at the top on the left-hand side. Click on that, and it'll take you to the page. On that page, you will have the calculator. It'll talk you through how to get your taxable value and to figure out what you would be paying in those various borrowings. It also has a map, an interactive map you can click on that talks about the various projects throughout the city. We also have a Facebook page that has some information. And if you have any questions, you can email lw2020@lakeworth.org and we'll respond back. I know that staff, all of us have been talking to people and answering their questions, walking them through the calculator or whatever you need. So please avail yourself of these resources and you can get the facts. And with that, Miss Mary, that's the end of our presentation. I guess we're going to take some questions.
Don't be scared. Okay, the reason this pan is here is because this church, this community church in our neighborhood, serves the hungry, just plain people who are hungry in our community, and that's what this pan represents. So in gratitude for their generosity and always making this hall available for neighborhood meetings and other community functions, I'm going to pass this can around and ask you to be as generous as you can for the First Congregational Church. Thank you. On your tables, you'll see a piece of paper, two-sided piece of paper that looks like this. And there should be more than enough of these for everyone in the room. A couple of years ago, all our precincts were redistricted, the lines were redrawn in Lake Worth. So here's a new map. Find where you live on the map, that's your precinct number, and then on the back of it, it tells you by precinct number the location where you go to exercise our precious democratic right to vote. Okay, we're at the point now where I know everybody has questions and I know people have comments. Has anybody written down a comment on one of the comment cards? Would you please?
They're all there.
Are there any over here? Just please hold them up. Questions, I'm sorry, questions. Larry, would you collect those, please? All right, so I guess we'll do this questions, the written questions first, and then we'll take questions from the room. Is that all right with everyone?
Yeah, I might actually answer some of the questions.
Okay.
Come on, no, come on.
All right, first question. Can the money be spent for other things besides what's written in the bond?
The bond documents are very specific as to what the projects will be. In addition, each year, as part of the city's annual audit, the auditors review what has been done, what is going to be done. They will report in their audit report if we have complied with those requirements in the bond documents and in the covenants of the bond documents. Any variation from that will be reported as part of their audit report. In addition, as Mike said, there's an internal audit. There's also going to be at the Finance Advisory Board or another group that will do that kind of thing also.
What's the interest rate for the bond? We had said that we calculated 5.5%. And is the rate to be fixed or variable?
The rate is estimated at 5%. However, at the time that we are ready to issue the bonds, we will go out in a competitive process and we will select underwriters who will, in their bid, tell us what the interest rate is that they're bidding on. At this point, the interest rate is slightly less than 5% for governmental borrowings, for entities with our particular credit rating. However, we're looking almost a year out, so we're not sure what that's going to be, just as if you were going to get a mortgage a year from now. You don't know exactly what it's going to be. However, the professionals that we have looking at it have determined that 5.5 will be on the high side, so that's good for estimates, and it will be a nice surprise when we actually do issue the bond. How accurate is the tax calculator on the city website? Well, it's a calculation methodology. So it's accurate in terms of what you're going to see for your assessed value, taxable value today. That may or may not be the taxable value at the time after the bonds are issued. So if your taxable value goes up, then the calculator is going to give you an answer today that will not be the same answer it would give you if your taxable value changes at the time that we issue the bonds.
Did the city commission cut the road paving budget in half? Why? No. The road paving budget is about 500. Here, this is Jamie Brown.
Yeah, it's a little over $500,000 each year, and what you have to keep in mind is 300 of that actually goes toward the streetlights. So all said and done, we have a little over $200,000 each year to put into the roads. Yeah, for the whole city.
That's the whole city. It's basically patching the potholes. The street light, and that's for the electricity and upkeep of the street lights in the city. Explain why bonds will be paid with ad valorem tax rather than non-ad valorem tax assessment.
no, I can. The normal methodology for most governments when they're borrowing for general capital projects, capital improvements, which roads are, is to do a general obligation bond. That is the least expensive to do. It is the one that is the easiest to sell. In terms of an assessment has to have a rational nexus to the property that is being improved. So it is difficult to do special assessment bonds. Not only that, the interest rate that they're issued at is higher than on a general obligation bond. It's sort of like the difference when you go and borrow on a mortgage, you get a mortgage rate, or you go and borrow on a signature loan. There are two different interest rates and one is more expensive.
Some of these questions are very similar. That was another one on assessments. Last night you said there are no plans to acquire anything with the funds. Then why is acquisition in the ballot language? If you read the ballot language, there are things in there that require us to buy, like asphalt or streetlights. So it's acquiring and improving. And that was the language that our legal staff came up with. It's not, we're not buying big swaths of land. I made that very clear. It's about everything within the road right of way. There we go. Sidewalks, streetlights, streetscapes, water and sewer facilities are things and equipment we have to buy in some of those cases, and that's the acquisition. I don't recall seeing the Commerce Park on the map for road work. What exactly is going to be done there, and what is the percentage of funds to be spent there? Will Commerce Park land be leased on sale? The Park of Commerce, which is Balboa Road and some of the side streets in the first two phases, is part of this project. The infrastructure there has, just like the rest of the city, not been in place. And because it hasn't been in place, the land in that area has not developed, honestly. There are several trailer parks there and people that use the road for residential purposes, but mostly it's industrial and business properties. The city does not own the land in the industrial park. This is about the roadway, the drainage, and the utilities within that area. It's important to understand 30% of the taxes paid to the city come from commercial and industrial properties. It's not just residential. Residential make a piece of that. But industrial and commercial make up almost 30% at this point. In a healthy city, you have a good spread of types of land uses, a portfolio of land uses. And it's important to understand that residential properties, for the most part, for every dollar they pay in taxes, they generally require more than that on average back in services, kind of lose money. Commercial and industrial, for every dollar they pay in taxes, about 40 cents is all that's required back in services. So they're a net subsidizer of taxes to the city and the cost of things. And there's no exemptions on the commercial as well, as Steve just said. So having a healthy industrial park where we can bring jobs, we can bring tax base is very important. We also get calls from the Business Development Board on a regular basis. And Kelly Smallridge will call me and she'll go, Mike, I have a business needs 10 acres shovel ready. And we don't have it in this city. We have to pass it up. And they call us first because we have the location. Off of I-95, there's rail right down the street from Palm Beach International Airport. And we pass up continuously.